the third page of the Maamar, page 211, last paragraph on the page. We were speaking about the idea that Yitzias Mitzrayim, from going out of Mitzrayim till reaching Matan Torah, there's the whole process of Sfiras HaOmer, that we have the level of the Omer Atnufa, and then we have, after the Omer Atnufa, we have the Wispartem Lachem, that we have to illuminate. We have to be mamshech from the Makifim and draw it down for an illumination, and then we have to have from those 7 weeks, Shava Shabbos Tmimos Tiyana, then there's the level of Tisperu Chamishim Yom, and this all brings about the level of Matan Torah. Then this is the idea that we have in everything. We have both the Elyonim and Tachtonim come together. The Elyonim and Tachtonim coming together, that's similar to coming from above. This is, by the way, this is Rotzi and Shuv, and also it has to do within the level of Elyonim coming down to Tachtonim. That's like Yitzias Mitzrayim, Hashem taking us out. And then there's the Tachtonim that are going up Elyonim, all of them to prepare for the unity of both of them by Matan Torah. And then he says that these two things has to be also in the avoid of every Yid, the Elyonim and Tachtonim as well, the chibur between them, that coming from above, below, they have to be in the Sinas Koyach Malmaila. And in addition to that, there also has to be the Halam Malmata Lamaila, the elevation from below to above. So now he's going to explain what that is in Avodas Adam. So again, last paragraph on the third page, page 211. In the Yitzias Mitzrayim b'Avodas Adam, the idea of going out of Mitzrayim and Avodah Vayit, he avoided the Yitzim and Mitzrayim b'Gvulim. It's the avoid of going out of any types of constraints and boundaries and limitations. Like it's explained in many places, beginning from Tanya, for example, just like at the time of the actual going out of Mitzrayim. That the revelation from above was in such a way, like it says, he was skipping over the mountains and jumping over the hills, which means this skipping and this jumping indicates a revelation from above beyond any measure and boundary, in a way of skipping, even higher than this, even a level of jumping. So there's this type of revelation that took place by Yitzias Mitzrayim. In the same way, in our avoid of Yitzias Mitzrayim, there also has to be this type of level that's above and beyond limitations. Also in a similar vein down here below, in the avodah. When Yidden were going out of Mitzrayim and they had the idea of the Korban Pesach, it was beyond all measure and boundary in a way of skipping and jumping. In the Pesach, that idea that they slaughtered the Korban Pesach or Pesach or Lashon Dilug Kfitza. The very meaning of the word Pesach is from the word skipping and jumping. So this indicates that the avodah is in such a way that all the avodas of the Korban Pesach had to be in such a way of skipping and jumping, like it's brought down in Rashi, how it had to be in a way of b'chipazon, etc., etc. And so too, it was in the simple sense. It was about Shiyotzu Meretz Mitzrayim Kipshuta. They actually literally went out of the land of Mitzrayim, which is Meitzarim B'Gvulim She'ein Lamata Mehem. It was constraints and boundaries that there was nothing lower than the top of the next page. Like it was then the state and situation of the land of Mitzrayim, which was a physical geographic location, and it was the lowest possible state. Similar to this is also the idea of going out of Mitzrayim. In the avodah vayid, he avoided the Yitzim and Mitzrayim v'gvulim. It's the avoid of going out of constraints and boundaries as well. Fulfilling the obligation that says, so you should remember the day of your going out of the land of Mitzrayim all your days. which means that we have to experience and we have to also have this Yitziyam and Mitzarim V'Gvulim in our own avodah. Specifically, when do we do it during the day? We have to remember every day what part of the day is devoted to that. In general, it's a time of Kriyashma. That's why at the conclusion of the avodah of Kriyashma we say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher tzeisi eschem eretz Mitzrayim u'komer. I am Hashem your God that took you out of the land of Mitzrayim, which means that Kriyashma, its culmination, its goal, its purpose is about going out of Mitzrayim. Especially, let's explain in Tanya, through the actual service and what we're speaking about, and the idea of Kriyashma, Nasa, Inyan, the Chayiv, Adam, Liris, Satzmoy, Ki'ilu, Yatzayim, Mitzrayim. It becomes the idea of a person needs to see themselves as if they went out today from Mitzrayim, that he's leaving and going out of his constraints and boundaries. That is the whole idea of Kriyashma, to go out of those limitations, to go out of his Yitzias Mitzrayim. So now he continues, what does that mean in our Avodas Hashem? We've identified it, what part of the day, what specific mitzvah, the mitzvah of reading Kriyashma is the idea of Yitzias Mitzrayim. But what is the actual going out of Mitzrayim in Avodah? So he says in the second paragraph, the explanation of the general idea of going out of Mitzrayim, which means going out of one's constraints and boundaries in Avodah, is seemingly the question is, how is this even possible? If I'm limited, that's who I am. How can I leave that behind? How is it possible for me to leave behind the straits and the boundaries? Since the neshama descended below from a high building to a deep pit, the neshama is enclosed in the animal soul, and in the body. And he deals with and is involved in his allotted portion of the world. That's found in constraints and boundaries, that there's nothing lower than it. Like the Tanya used the expression, in this low world, that there's nothing lower than it. In a similar vein, not just in the world, that the big world, there's no world lower than that. Also in the miniature worlds, that's the person, so he's like stuck in that world, in that low place. How is it possible for a person to exit it? How is it possible to have Yitzias Mitzrayim, to go out of these constraints and boundaries? That's the idea of the avodah of davening. The tefillah is a ladder that stands on the ground, and its top reaches the heavens. Even though he finds himself on the ground, that the word artsa with the hey at the end indicates that it's even lower than an ordinary eretz. So it's in eretz itself, in the ground itself, it's the lowest part of the ground. But the top of the ladder of davening reaches to the heavens, which again, the hey at the end of Shemayim, Hashamayim instead of Hashamayim, that's Lamayla Mishamayim Stam, it's higher than the ordinary level of Shemayim. That through the idea of davening, that the davening was established by the others. So he explains an interesting idea. It's not just that the others established this, but the tefillahs connect him to the others. Through davening, he binds himself, and through the binding himself to them, he arrives at the avodah that's similar to the avodah of the Alvis. From standing on the ground, and even the lower level of the ground, Arza, he reaches to the highest level of Shemayim HaShemayim. So now he's going to explain where we see the avodah of the Alvis reflected in davening. So he says, "V'hine al pizam shayidei inat tefillah tzarich lavi lavoida shebedugma lavoida sa'od." But it's according to the fact that through davening, a person has to arrive to avoid that's similar to the avoida of the forefathers. Yuvin gamkein mashin yone atfil. It'll also be understood what the matters of davening, upsuki atfilah, and the different psukim in davening, v'toichnat bakasha shebetfilah, and the content of the requests in davening. And begimel sugim are in three general categories. We can divide all of davening. Shekineged avodas hagimel avos. That these three categories that we find throughout davening correspond to the avoid of the three avos. Kimavur could the Torah parsha saying, like to explain could the Torah of our parsha. The yeshnam psukim veinyanim shetoichnam bedugma lavodas Avram. There are those psukim and matters that their content is similar to the avoid of Avram. Avram, oyavi Avram, my beloved. V'hainu shemeviim la'avas Hashem. They bring to the love of Hashem. Shayodam bo levahaftas havay lekecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafsha b'chol meidecha. These particular psukim that we have in davening, these bring the person to fulfill what it says in Krishma: you shall love Hashem your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. So in other words, that's reflective in davening. Those particular sections in davening that bring to love, that is the Avram Avinu connection that the person has in davening. And in general, the fact that his avodah becomes similar to the avodah of Avram, that he comes to the love of Hashem, how is that? What brings about that avodah of love? Why? Through contemplating in the greatness of the Creator, till he sees that the entire train order of descent has no significance and has no value and importance whatsoever in comparison to godliness. As it's known, the example for this when it comes to numbers. Even when you talk about the number one, it still has some significance to thousands upon thousands and tens upon tens of thousands, because eventually with enough single ones you can come to that number, however large that number is. Mash'enkin, as opposed to top of page 213, Gvul legabe bli gvul, when you talk about the finite in comparison to the infinite, hu legamri be'ein aroich, it's completely incomparable. V'chol mashi is gad la gvul, ein litfisus makim klal legabe bli gvul. The greater the bounded thing is, doesn't have any significance in comparison to the infinite. Kimavur betanya. In other words, we said that one, in comparison to tens upon tens of thousands, has some type of connection. But let's say if you have tens upon tens of thousands in comparison to the infinite, that has no significance whatsoever. As big as you'll make the number, since it's still a number, it's limited. Millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, whatever there is, whatever number you come up with, it's not going to bring you any closer to the infinite. So therefore, once we know that in the idea of gvul concerning bli gvul, how much more so, second line from the top, Alachas kam v'kam l'gabel l'kus shalom ma'ilem geder gvul bli gvul b'yachad gam yachad. When comparing it to godliness, that godliness is beyond infinite and finite, both of them together. The infinite and the finite is insignificant compared to him. Is moven headed fisas makom shalagvul. It's understood what insignificance anything that's limited has. Shuba headed with fisas makom lagamri. That it's completely insignificant in comparison to godliness, which is beyond limitation and beyond unlimited. When a person contemplates this, until this meditation permeates him completely, and he comes to the realization That through his avodah, he has the capability to reach to the heavens, and like we said, the highest levels of the heavens. He has the capability to reach that level that's completely incomparable, and nothing is like it whatsoever. That then he will be inspired and awakened to have a love of Hashem. In addition to coming to loving Hashem your God with all your heart and all your soul, he will come to a love that's with all your might, that's beyond measure and boundary. The level of ma'od, as we know, Chassidus always talks about ma'od indicating breaking through all boundaries. And therefore, this answers the question how he's able to leave behind the constraints and the boundaries, the idea of going out of Mitzrayim, because the level of this love attaches him and draws him out of the limitations of this world. So this is only one of the three things that we find in davening. But in davening, since the Avos established the davening, we said it, we have in the davening reflected the avodah of all three of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that is an avodah that every person can attain, similar to the Avos and connect to the Avos. So up till now we spoke about Avram, the avodah of Ava. Now we're going to talk about the avodah of Yitzchak. There are those matters of davening that the content of those parts of davening inspire and awaken the person to an avodah similar to the avodah of Yitzchak. What was the avodah of Yitzchak? Pachad Yitzchak hayoli. The fear of Yitzchak was to me. In other words, he had the level of awe of Hashem. For example, the person contemplates how low man is. Or that's one thing that can bring him to be in a state of awe, in a state of yira. Or he thinks into the fact, in the greatness of the creation, the greatness of the Creator, how every movement that a person makes matters and has significance. Someone that makes a circle in the air in front of the king, it's called disrespecting the king, even though it's a slight movement. The same thing, because the greatness of Hashem, any minor thing that I do has a significance, and I need to be careful with it. When he thinks into this, he comes to a state of fear of Hashem. Not just a level of fear of punishment, but rather higher than this, until a level of a supernal fear, of a fear of the highest level. Also, through this higher level of fear, he goes out of his constraints and his boundaries. The higher level of awe is, like we mentioned recently, Chitas has to do with the level of Shem Yud, of the letter Yud of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, because it has to do with the sphere of Chachma. Yirei Ilah has to do with Chachma. Chachma is the Yud of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, Ad Lekutze Yud, until even the point on top of the Yud, which is even higher than Chachma. So we see about the person being able to go out of their boundaries and constraints through the avodah of Yira, through connecting with the Avos and davening, specifically over here, this case, we're talking about Yitzchak. Now we have also the third one of the Avos. We have Yaakov Avinu. Inyan Ashlish Avodas Havai. The third aspect in the service of Hashem that are on the psukim and the matters of davening is the midah of Yaakov. Yaakov's attribute is the attribute of mercy. That's the idea behind those specific davenings that we're asking. The king that is exalted. In your great mercy, have compassion upon us. Avinu Avarachman, our Father, the Father of mercy, Rachim Naleinu, have compassion upon us. V'sein b'lebeinu binu lahavnu lahaskil, place in our heart our understanding, to understand and to figure out. V'loy neighbors, loy nekalm, loy levad, will not be embarrassed and shamed forever. So what is the idea and what is the meditation over here? The idea behind this is even someone that's, heaven forbid, immersed in the vanities of the world and the insignificant matters of the world, she is sorry ba'avad sheyeh la'avad b'chol meidach v'al derech ze b'yira shalom ma'ilum didvak bolam, that this above mentioned meditation is not sufficient to extract him from his vanities that he's involved in this world. That he should become inspired with a love, that he should reach a love with all your might, and similarly he should reach a level of the awe that's beyond measure and boundary. They should come to the highest level of yira and the ultimate perfection. So if he's incapable of reaching that, then there has to be the avodah that comes from the idea of the midah of Hashem's mercy and compassion. So to be able to explain this, he's going to get into a whole concept over here concerning the world's insignificance in comparison to the Eibishter. And it's going to go on for a few pages until we get back to this idea of the Midas Harachim. So he says, last paragraph on page 5, there is bonus that's explained at length in many of the Maamarim of the Rebbe Marash, Bal Yom Miledus, the one whose Yom Miledus, this was the Maamar was said on Beizir, the Gamba Maamar, and also in the Maamar like my father-in-law wrote, Shalchol Nasi, that every Rebbe of Nasi Chabad had a Maamar that they used to repeat it once every 2 or 3 years to purify the air. By the Rebbe Marash, the Maamar they would repeat every 2-3 years for this purpose was the following Maamar: who is like you in the strong ones, Havaya, who is like you, that's adorned and exalted and glorified in holiness. The Maim Rabin, and the point of this meditation that's explained in the series of Maamarim, beginning with the pasuk Maim Rabin. So this is the point that's explained over there in the Maimar of the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe is going to elaborate on what the Rebbe Marash says. The Ine Alakos of Mikomach Beil Mavai, Mikomach Nadabakodesh, who is like you in the mighty ones Havai, who is like you, that's glorified in holiness. Tirgum Yonason, so the Targum Yonason ben Azil says, Min Kavosach, who is like you, Be'elam Roima, in the mighty ones of above Havaya. In other words, there's no one like you amongst the mighty ones above, as I'll soon explain who the mighty ones above he's referring to. The Unkelus Tirgum, and Unkelus translated it, Leis Bar Minach. There is no one except for you. The general point of difference between these two explanations of the Targum Yonason versus the Targum Onkelos, according to the explanation of the Targum Yonason, the meaning of the pasuk is the afilu be'elim, even in the mighty ones, that's talking about the mighty ones above. The koyafilu al madregus alekim, it's referring even to the level of El Shem Elakim, but not necessarily just the name Elakim, but rather the way the Malachim are called by the name Elakim. Even in such a high level of the Malachim that are called Elakim, one cannot compare whatsoever any one of the Malachim to the Eibishter, the Min Kavosach Be'elim, who is like you in the mighty ones above. That is the Pirush of the Targum Yonason ben Azil. But the Targum Onkelos says even deeper. Even higher than this is the explanation in Targum Onkelos. the less bar minach, that there's literally no one beside you. Not there's no one like you. There's nothing else beside you. That's the idea that Chassidus talks about the whole time of Einoid Mulvadi. And the Rebbe is going to go on at length to explain the two aspects and the two ways of looking at things, the way it is in the Targum Yonasan ben Azil versus Targum Onkelos in the following pages of the Maamar.